It's Monday, July 28th, 2025. Is a tariff rebate check in our future? What in the world could have led to FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino's post over the weekend and a harrowing evacuation at Denver's airport? Next on the AM Update. President Donald Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a trade deal between the United States and the European Union on Sunday. The announcement came moments after the two had addressed the media, agreeing that the likelihood of an agreement was about 50-50. Von der Leyen said the negotiations had taken some heavy lifting, but the two leaders agreed they were happy with the result. Trump said they're agreeing on a straight tariff across the board for automobiles, and everything else will be a straight across tariff of 15%. Trump is also touting hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into the United States from the EU, as well as access to the European market for American automobiles. Prior to leaving for that trip to Scotland, President Trump addressed the media on the topic of tariffs and said we're raking in so much money, he's considering cutting people a check.
We're thinking about that, actually. We have so much money coming in. We're thinking about a little rebate, but the big thing we want to do is pay down debt. But we're thinking about a rebate. That's a very good question.
Earlier on in that meeting with the head of the European Union, Trump said there's no wiggle room for the August 1st implementation of tariffs on all these countries.
The August 1st is there for everyone. The deals all start on August 1st. Most of the deals, other than steel and aluminum, which we've been getting 50% tariffs from, I guess, just about everybody, and those have come in, and we've taken in, hundreds of billions of dollars just on steel and aluminum. You've seen the numbers.
So the August 1st date is when tariffs begin for all of these countries you've heard in the last few weeks, except for China. It was reported in multiple outlets yesterday. They're continuing a 90-day pause. Back at home, Russ Vought, that would be the Office of Management and Budget Director, he sat down with CNN and said he's making big progress in the entire administration. Government is making big progress on actually achieving a balanced budget.
CBO was using artificial baselines that treat spending as eternal and tax relief that was in law since 2017 to be temporary. And so if you adjust for that, and the bill does have additional tax relief, of which we paid for with spending reductions, this bill reduces deficits and will help us with the national debt. Overall, the moves that we are making as an economic team under President Trump's leadership will lead to about a third of what's necessary to balance the budget, given the numbers that you just articulated. Mm-hmm. That's just in our 6 months. When you talk about the tariff revenues that are coming in, $3 trillion, CBO believes the same numbers that we have. And again, those are in advance of a number of the trade agreements that we're talking about over the next several weeks. So we're making big moves, and I think the country is going to come alongside of us and see the progress that we're making.
That is Office of Management and Budget Director Russ Vought talking about how the One Big Beautiful Bill helps, at least in part, to address the deficit and national debt. So already, over the weekend, two people in very high-ranking positions talking about the national debt. I wonder why that is. Moving on back to the topic du jour. I'm not even sure that's what that means. But the topic of the week last week was the Russiagate hoax. Here's the current CIA Director John Ratcliffe on Fox News yesterday morning discussing his view of what actually happened and what they're learning from some of these declassified documents that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is putting out.
There is no doubt in my mind that the people that we just talked about conspired. They conspired against President Trump. They conspired against the American people. And so I'll leave it to Pam Bondi and our Department of Justice, Kash Patel, and our FBI to investigate the conspiracy to do what and what charges that they're capable of bringing. But again, I don't think statute of limitations are going to impact, because in a conspiracy, Maria, the statute of limitation doesn't start to run until the last act in furtherance of that conspiracy. And Maria, part of why this is so important is the people behind this are still furthering the conspiracy. They're refusing to admit or acknowledge what they did in 2016 and what they did in 2020 was wrong. And so I think that's why this is so important.
So that's pretty notable to me that the current CIA Director, John Ratcliffe, just out and out says he thinks there is a criminal conspiracy here. And also notably, he points out that the statute of limitations for anybody involved with the furtherance of the Russiagate collusion conspiracy, now that's not going to come into play because that's not how statute of limitations works for conspiracies. Well, he mentioned another three-letter agency, the FBI. FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino boldly declared Saturday he made recent discoveries about a government corruption and weaponization that shocked him down to the core. Without elaborating on what he found out, Bongino teased that investigations into those discoveries are ongoing and being done by the book. He wrote in a post on X, quote, "What I've learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I have learned." Bongino did not provide a timeline for when the public might learn what he's talking about and underscored that while he is not as visible as he once was during his podcast days, quote, "Things are happening." What in the world could Dan Bongino have discovered that shakes him to his core? I mean, this is a pretty seasoned guy who's in the Secret Service. He's been all over the media, built a media empire for himself. He has been on the leading edge of things like the Russiagate hoax and other matters. And yet, what he's discovered during his stint as Deputy Director of the FBI has shaken him. He says, looking ahead to 2028, one person I think is a dark horse is Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. He's got 9 jobs, man. I mean, he's doing like 9 different jobs in the administration. He was asked by Lara Trump on Fox News if he's considering a 2028 run. I thought his answer was pretty interesting.
Final question. You just brought up your run in 2016 for president. You are talked about quite frequently as a possible contender in 2028. Do you have your sights set outside of the State Department?
Well, I think J.D. Vance would be a great nominee. And if, I think if he decides he wants to do that. And so, I think he's doing a great job as vice president. He's a close friend, and I hope he intends to do it. I know it's kind of early, but being in the role that I'm in here at the Secretary of State, I really don't play in politics. There's actually rules against me being involved in domestic politics, and I want to do this job as long as the president allows me to do it, and stay in that job, which would keep me here all the way through January of 2028. I feel, honestly, you never know what the future holds. You never rule things out or anything like that, because you just don't know. Things change very quickly. But that said, I believe that if I am able to be here, through the duration of this presidency, and we get things done at the pace that we've been doing the last 6 months, I'll be able to look back at my time in public service and say, I made a difference, I had an impact, and I served my country in a very positive way. And I would be satisfied with that as the apex of my career, and so that's what I'm focused on right now, because we're doing some special things that I think are going to bear dividend and fruit for a generation.
So that is an interesting answer there from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, asked whether he's thinking about running in 2028. I think there's 2 things going on there. I mean, he just completely volunteered and said, just said, no, J.D. Vance should run. And I think he's done a fine job, and we're friends. I think he should run. That was interesting. He didn't try to beat around the bush there. I also think another thing that's going on here is everybody knows, whoever gets Trump's endorsement is going to win that primary. And right now, it seems that conventional wisdom is that that's going to be Vance. Now, unless Marco Rubio knows something that the rest of us don't know, which is entirely possible, Marco Rubio might actually know that he's actually the favored son and not J.D. Vance. And so there's no need to create any drama between him and Vance right now. He's just giving that answer. I think that's maybe one of 2 things that's happening here. Now, there's been a lot of talk recently about the favorability of the Republican Party and some leading indicators going into the midterms that they could be on the brink of disaster. Just saw this the other day. Percentage who say they're extremely motivated to vote in the next election. In October of 2022, 48% of Republicans said they were extremely motivated versus 44% of Democrats. That was the last midterm election. Going into this next midterm, as of this July, 72% of Democrats say they're very motivated to vote in the next election, while only 50% of Republicans say the same. Nevertheless, though, the Democrat Party's net favorability has hit a new historic low of 30% below. That means that 30% more people disapprove of the Democrat Party than they do approve. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. I wonder if it has something to do with people like Nancy Pelosi, whose, let's just face it, her Botox is starting to wear off. And here she is talking about Mental acuity.
What happened
second thoughts?
Last summer or with
I don't have any second thoughts, but I do have a second thought about the Republicans. If they want to measure mental acuity or sanity, they ought to look to their own president, because the president of the United States, who was asked one question and answers by saying President Obama is guilty of treason, he is not of sane mind.
Yeah, there's Nancy Pelosi, as always, slurring her words, now looking closer to death's door than at any point I can remember the last 5 years or so. Talking about even Republicans want to talk about mental acuity, they should look at the commander-in-chief. You go, girl. When we come back, a harrowing evacuation on the tarmac at Denver's airport. Why are there so many of these incidents happening? I just can't ignore this. Also, a mass stabbing in Michigan leads to charges of terrorism. That's coming up next. That is the sound of passengers evacuating an American Airlines flight on the tarmac at Denver's International Airport. Passengers slid down an emergency slide of a smoking jet due to a possible problem with the plane's landing gear. American Airlines Flight 3023 reported a possible landing gear incident during its departure from Denver on Saturday afternoon. That's according to the Federal Aviation Administration. The problem involved an aircraft tire, according to American Airlines. One of the passengers was taken to the hospital with a minor injury. 5 people were evaluated for injuries at the scene but did not require hospitalization. According to passenger Sean Williams talking to KUSA-TV, quote, about halfway to takeoff speed, we hear a big bang and a pop. The pilot immediately started to abort procedures for taking off. You could feel him start to hit the brakes. Firefighters extinguished a fire on the aircraft, according to the Denver Fire Department. American Airlines said in a statement, all customers and crew deplaned safely, and the aircraft was taken out of service to be inspected by our maintenance team. So that was the last that I can recall in a trio of aviation-related incidents last week. There were 2 incidents out west, one of them in California, of commercial aircraft having to take pretty dramatic evasion techniques to avoid collisions with other aircrafts. 2 of those last week. One that comes off the top of my head was in Burbank, California. A commercial aircraft, had to evade a B-52 bomber who was doing a flyover for some event. Just wild stuff. A 42-year-old man is facing charges of terrorism and assault with intent to murder after he allegedly stabbed 11 people at a Walmart store in Michigan and was apprehended by a group of citizens, including one armed with a gun. The suspect, whom authorities identified as 42-year-old Bradford James Gill of Sheboygan County, Michigan, allegedly entered the Walmart store in Traverse City, around 150 miles north of Grand Rapids, around 4:10 p.m. on Saturday, and began attacking people with a folding knife. Grand Traverse County Sheriff Michael Shea said all of the victims appeared to be at random, and said investigators are combing through security video that recorded nearly all of the attack. Witnesses helped law enforcement officers stop the attack and take the suspect into custody. Meanwhile, in Ohio, in Cincinnati, after departing a jazz festival, videos circulated on social media appearing to show a violent brawl breakout and 2 white individuals being curb stomped and knocked out. The Cincinnati Police Department says they're investigating that video circulating on the web that appears to show that fight in downtown Cincinnati over the night Friday into Saturday. Cincinnati police say they are investigating the fight that occurred on Elm and 4th Streets. Different videos of the incident have been shared on social media. An anonymous witness reported that the situation started several minutes before the fight shown in the videos. The footage captured a man who, according to the witnesses, seemed to be intoxicated. The witness says the man walked away, but then returned 15 minutes later with a large group of people who were overheard making racial comments. Of course, that totally justifies, even if that's true, totally justifies the complete beating and curb stomping of 2 individuals. The video showed probably a group of 10 to 15 individuals. I think you can guess what they look like. Just completely ganging up on this couple who were returning from a jazz festival in Cincinnati. And of course, nobody in the national media, in the mainstream media, is reporting on the story. The optics there regardless of what precipitated that fight, absolutely awful. And now here's this. This is just the most recent example of this phenomenon from the boomer generation about not leaving anything behind for their children. This is a comedian and author I've never heard of before, named Tony Hawks, talking to BBC Radio Sheffield over in the United Kingdom about why he's not planning on leaving anything behind for his children.
My interest in this may have come from the fact that for some reason my father, I had one brother, he said to both of us, I'm not going to leave you anything. And I thought that was rather interesting. It didn't seem to bother me at all. My brother, he wasn't so keen on the idea, but he told us and we knew, and so we had to go out in the world knowing that's what was going to happen. But a lot of people say, well, look, it's so hard, you've got to help your children. I can't get it out of my head. What about all the children that won't get anything at all? It just seems very unfair on them that through an accident of birth, that some people get a leg up, some people get a massive leg up, some people get a little leg up, but they're not going to get anything. And I don't know why I think that way. I just think it isn't fair, because my son hasn't done anything other than be born to me to earn that money. So I think we need to think again. Myself, I know I'm pretty much on my own on this.
No, you're not.
I'm not sure whether just an automatic leaving things to family is relevant anymore. It used to be, but I'm not so sure anymore.
What are you going to do with this money if you don't leave it to your son? Are you going to spend like Viv Nicholson?
No, what I'm actually doing is I'm setting up a charitable trust, leaving Arlo a job, if he wants to take it, working for that charity, helping to give money away to good causes.
So that is author and comedian Tony Hawks explaining why he's not going to give any of his hard-earned money. He's not going to leave that as an inheritance for his son. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I've never heard of Tony Hawks before, but this video went viral over the last week, and he's just the latest in a long line from the boomer generation of people who are pretty successful, who are announcing for the world to hear that they're not leaving anything behind for their children. I'm mixed about this. He said, I'm out here on my own. I know I'm alone on this issue. No, you're not, actually. There are a lot of people, entertainers, who from your generation have come to the same conclusion. I think there are two things that can be true at the same time when it comes to commentaries that you just heard like this. Number one, if you're somebody from his son's generation, number one, you are not entitled to anything. You're just not. Everything that's given to you by your parents is a gift. Absolutely. So I don't really like the reflexive, just a selfish POS here. Just a selfish boomer. Screw him. No, I don't think that's the right reaction to have. Nobody is entitled to anything. But I think another thing can be true at the same time. Not giving your inheritance away because you think it's unfair or you don't want your own children to have a leg up versus other kids who didn't have as good of parents as you. Isn't that an indictment of yourself? Isn't what you just heard an indictment, a self-indictment? That I didn't raise the type of kid who can handle an inheritance? I didn't raise the type of kid that I can trust to not squander that all away? I didn't raise the type of kid who would just look at me as if he's an ingrate and demand money. I didn't raise the type of kid who is worthy of an inheritance. That is the greatest self-own ever. And that's what all of these successful boomers who you see and from periodically from these videos, that's what they're saying about themselves, that they screwed up as parents. That's what I think they're saying anyway. So, well, yeah, I don't have the reaction to this. If this was my own father and saying, hey, I'm going to set this up for a charity, things like that. Well, I'd be disappointed, but, I'm not entitled to anything. So I got to be a grown up about that and just move on. At the same time, though, if you're saying this about your own children, you don't think that they can handle an inheritance, you're indicting yourself. That's the bigger story here. That's going to do it for Monday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.